Okay, folks, welcome to the Western Civilization 2 course. That's the HIS 102 course. Some of you had me last semester, so you know what you're looking at right now. And I know what I'm looking at, too, because I'm staring right into the camera. But anyway, let's take a few minutes here. I want to talk to you a little bit about the introduction to the course. And then I've got quite a number of things that we need to mention as we get into our first lecture today. So let me go to my documents camera here, and we'll get our light adjusted right. And this is the course that you're in, Western Civilization 2 course. You can find this on your Canvas site here, folks, the syllabus. Now, the one I'm going to show you is not the exact one that you're going to see as you actually access the system. We're not online here for the spring semester yet, so I'm just having to use an old syllabus. But you're going to find something similar to this. This is done by the Alabama Community College system, and this is not really appropriate for this semester. And yours will look, like I said, a little bit different for that. But you can read through this at your leisure here. It just tells you about the course in general. I did not develop that. There's several pages to this, so you can look those over. And then as you do so, you'll find that you have the syllabus that I produce for you good folks. Notice up here in this corner here that we do have two sections here. The way I see it right now, we'll probably only have the Tuesday, Thursday section. The Monday, Wednesday section might be present here. I don't know, but I think I plan for just this Tuesday, Thursday section, 11 o'clock, 12:15. We'll see how that shakes out with that. And this tells you about the course in general here. It starts off here giving you your textbook for the course. And let me show you what your textbook looks like here. This is the 20th edition of the textbook. Make sure that you get Volume 2, Western Civilization. It's by Joshua Cole, Carroll Science. It's a brand new textbook, by the way. Here, but you can see what it looks like. Got a lot of people in there. You know, it looks like it's 19th century Europe. Pretty good textbook. A lot of used copies around. If you can get a used copy, I strongly recommend that you go in that direction here. Pardon me. Telling you about the course in general. We have classroom activities, lectures, discussion, audiovisual. Those of you that had me last semester, you know that I use visuals all the time. You'll see a number of them today, too. We'll have reading assignments. We'll also have some quizzes take place and examinations, periodic examinations. The way it stands right now, and we're still a little bit early, folks, so things may change any minute now. We're still in the pandemic, so we really don't know exactly how it's all going to all shake out in January. But the way I see it right now, you will probably come to my class. If you have the Tuesday, Thursday class, you'll probably come on Tuesday, and then you'll have a lecture face-to-face, and then probably on the Thursday class, depending on how many students we have in the class, then you'll probably be sitting at home, you know, watching the recorded videos here. In the meantime, the other half of the course will come back on Thursday and see the face-to-face class, whereas the other half will actually have the recorded documentaries here, the recorded lectures. Evaluation for the course here, 3 regular examinations take place, 100 points each, and you'll have a final examination, 200 points. I haven't really ironed this out yet. You'll see it later with announcements and all that as we actually get into the course. What we will probably have for those students that stay at home and watch the recorded videos, you'll probably have a quiz like you had last time, a 5-10 point quiz, you know, to be answered in just several minutes with that. Those that see me face to face, you know, one day a week, you will probably not have the quiz. That's the way I see it right now. Like we had last semester here, folks, it's going to be really difficult here, things being online and all, you know, to try to do any kind of makeup. So if you miss one of the quizzes, you just sacrifice those points. And unless it is a life-threatening situation, if you miss one of my regularly scheduled examinations here, there won't be a makeup for that. So anyway, that's just the way we're going to do business here. There's a page 2 that addresses subjects here like attendance, classroom environment, promptness, be on time. You absolutely have to be on time. And in fact, if you're for the face-to-face section here, if you're not on time for the class, you know, I won't allow you to come in at a late time. Okay, it gave you a few more pieces of information here about classroom security, my office hours here, which I'll have it posted and make it more current, but it'll probably be very close to what you're seeing right now. And let's see what else we have associated with this. And I have the day-by-day activities for the course. This will be just a sample for you here. It will change, but it'll be similar to this. We'll have on the first day, like today, introduction. And then I'm going to actually start over in about chapter 15 here in your textbook here, and we'll pick that up. But you'll see that later, and in fact, in about 5-10 minutes with that. All right, so anyway, that gives you the examination times here, but it will be different dates on that, but it'll be spaced, about every 5 weeks, and a final examination date. You'll see that likewise here. Okay, and there will also be a supplemental reader associated with this. Now, I have these supplemental readers in the classroom. I've got just a handful of copies, but you can always just come into the classroom, and instead of buying a supplemental reading guide, you can just read those assignments right there in class. And I'd suggest you come in before class and take care of that. So anyway, that's kind of the way we do business here. You might be curious about what we're going to talk about this semester. It might be easier to tell you what we went over last semester. And we started out with Mesopotamia, ancient Sumer, went into the Egyptians. Later we went into the Hebrews. I think we threw in the Hittites, the Kassites. We finally made our way up here to the Hebrews, the Greeks. Went into the Romans. Before we got into the Romans, we went into Alexander the Great, Macedonians, Philip the Great. After the Romans, we went into the Middle Ages here. Made quick discussions here with the Byzantines, talked about Christianity, went through Islam, if you will, here. We spent more time with High Middle Ages, Later Middle Ages. Finally, we got into the Renaissance, then European explorations, Genghis Khan, and the Protestant Reformation. This semester, we will start out with these religious wars, and there are a lot of religious wars. And we'll get started with those today, as a matter of fact, here. And the Iron Century. From there, the next time we get together, we will begin the section on absolutism. That will take 2 or 3 lectures to get through. Scientific Revolution, the Enlightenment, French Revolution, all that's fun information there, folks. We'll get into the second third of the semester with the Industrial Age, liberalism, nationalism. This kind of drags a little bit. I'll do the best I can to make it as interesting for you as possible. But, it's just some of this period of time here of the 19th century America is just not the most interesting material. We'll get into imperialism. That's kind of fun here with Europe colonizing much of the rest of the world, including that of Africa and China. Then we get into the third. You'll have your second examination. We get into the third part of the course. This is fun stuff. We go into World War I, the period between the wars, Adolf Hitler, Benito Mussolini, the rise to power of Japan. We finally get into World War II, the Cold War, and then finally into the last 30 years that we've been living in. All right, so anyway, that's kind of the way the class works here, folks. And I'm going to go back to my document camera in just a second. But my recommendations for you, for those of you that have not had me before, you need to treat this course exactly like it was an in-class course, and you will be in class, I hope, anyway. And for my sake and also for your sake, too. Your instructors want to be in class by and large here, folks. Few people don't, but most of us want to be there face-to-face with you good folks here. But you need to have a notebook. You need to take notes with that. My recommendation, I'm not going to exclude you from the recorded videos, so if you actually attend a class with me face-to-face, you can always go back and look at that recorded video a second time. Nevertheless, if you're supposed to be in class, I expect you to be in class with that. All right, so we're going to go into our next section here, my friends, and let's see if I can use this guideline here to kind of guide you through this. And you can see here that we're going to be in Western Civilization 2, the Iron Century. That's what this period of time is known as. Let me see if I have some dates here. There's dates here, 1540 to 1660. Obviously, it dates more than just a century with that. Excuse me, pardon me for that. And so it does date more than a century. Please do not confuse this with the Iron Age. It has nothing to do with the Iron Age whatsoever here. But it's a time of great turbulence, a time of severe trials, strifes. In many ways, it was just an effort just to struggle to stay alive during this Iron Century. So get comfortable with that term. I use it quite a bit. Now, we're going to have several concerns that brings us to this age of turbulence, the Iron Century. We have economic concerns, and I'm going to skip down here, and we also have religious matters. Now, it's going to take us just a few seconds to get through the economic concerns, but let's go back and address this topic for a second here. And I'm going to tell you here that during this period of the Iron Century, it was a time of price revolution. Everything was expensive. Everything was expensive here. And for the average worker wages, you just could not keep up with the price of inflation and goods going up. Let me give you some examples here, folks. And we're talking about during the time of about 1540 that the price of wheat went up 3 times. It tripled. The price of grain quadrupled. It went up 4 times. The cost of living actually doubled at that time too. So people just did not have enough money. Cities did not have enough money. And what the cities ended up doing in trying to cope with this, the cities levied taxes upon the people. And the people didn't have the money in the first place to even be able to afford a comfortable way of life here. So really when the taxes were levied by the city, it just compounded the problems here for the people. And what really caused this, and the thing that really caused it, I'm going to go back to my camera just a second here ago, was there was a glut of silver. There was just absolutely too much silver and silver bullion that was present in Europe at that time. And you might wonder, why in the world do we have too much silver? Well, let me just point it out to you. Some of you start putting this together quite quickly if you had my course last semester. Spain was the richest country in the world. Spain was the richest country in Europe at that time. And Spain was the one that was collecting the silver. And I wonder where they were collecting the silver from. And the answer to that, they were getting it from the New World. They were getting it from the Spanish conquest of the Aztecs, and from the Inca here. And for the Inca, the Spanish forced slave labor upon the Incas for 100 years at the Potosi silver mines. And nonetheless here, my friends, it's going to make Spain the most wealthiest country in Europe and probably in the world. So what Spain was doing, Spain was very comfortable with that wealth, but all of the wealth was causing great amount of inflation. In the words of one person of that time, everything is expensive except silver. So we had a great amount of silver that was in circulation at that time. Ironically, this is going to serve to be the downfall of Spain because they never industrialized. They had too much wealth that was present there, and it will ultimately lead to the decline in their economy. All right, so let's go back to my documents camera here, and that kind of covered us here on the economic concerns of that time with the price revolution. But what's the other problem that we have? And that other problem here was religious matters. Religious matters. It was a never-ending war between Protestants and Catholics. It was a never-ending war with this. This was associated with religious rivalries of Protestants and Catholics at that time. Each of these two groups, the Protestants and the Catholics, viewed the other one as the Antichrist, And this was something that we just cannot relate to today. And I want to share a quotation with you from Voltaire. And we'll talk about Voltaire in a couple of weeks here, who was a French philosopher and a wonderful, wonderful person as we get into the enlightening movement here. But here's the way the quotation goes. Christianity is the most ridiculous, the most absurd, and the bloodiest religion that ever infected the earth. And to tell you the truth here, friends, it is very, very true. Christianity is the most ridiculous, bloodiest, and most dangerous religion that we had at that time. And you'll see this as we go through these wars here, where we have these Christians against Christians. And it's one of the things that we, in our society here in Walker County or wherever you live here, we don't pay much concern with this. I don't know if you are a religious person, but if you are a religious person and you attend a Baptist church on Sunday morning, do you worry about the Methodists attacking the Baptist church? Do you worry about the Catholics attacking the Methodist church or the Baptist church? And we don't do that. And if you're a Catholic and you're up at St. Cecilia's church, do you worry about in Mass that we'll have the Baptists and the Methodists and the First Christians and Presbyterians all descending upon your church and murdering you and taking your life? But that's what was happening during this iron century. We had Protestants against Catholics. So let's go through these series of wars that we had, and we had 4 of these wars that will take place. I'm going to list these out for you in just a second here. You may want to copy those down. We will go through 3 of those wars today, and when we come back for our next class meeting, we'll have the last of these. So let's go back to our documents camera so you can get some good notes with this, and let's see what we have here. As we had these religious wars, and I'm not going to cover that because I want you to see all of these wars first, but we had 4 of these religious wars. This first one, which will not take us very long to go over, is called the German Wars of Religion, or the German Religious Wars. It will last from roughly the 1540s up to 1555. And I'll give you a more precise ending to that war in just a second. We'll break each one of these down. And then we had the very devastating French Wars of Religion that took place from 1562 to 1598, kind of an interesting period of time. We also had the Dutch Wars of Religion with Spain, 1566. 1609, and then we won't talk about it today, but this brutal war that took place for 30 years, which bears that title, the 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648. All right, and it was a doozy of a war here, folks. So let's go back and pick up each one of these wars. I don't have a whole lot to tell you about this one. It's not really quick in time, but there's not a lot of information about it. But it's the German Religious Wars, 1540s, 1555, and the key individual associated with this is Charles V. Charles V, also known as Charles I, he is a Habsburg. All the Habsburgs, which come from Austria and Spain, and also in the Netherlands here, they are very, very devout Catholics. For those of you that have good recall, you remember this name, Charles I. All right, go back in time. Everybody recall Martin Luther, Protestant Reformation. Everybody remember the Diet of Worms? The Diet of Worms? And it was Charles V that had declared Martin Luther as a heretic. And it was Charles V that was going to preside over this trial for Martin Luther. Martin Luther, of course, as you well know, was whisked away by Frederick the Wise and hidden away in Wartburg Castle for a year. When he returned, came out of hiding, he found that all of his Protestant suggestions and practices had been endorsed by the University of Wittenberg in Saxony province with that. All right, so anyway, for Charles V, he sent a great number of Catholic forces into Germany, and of course this is going to cause a German civil war, so to speak here, religious war, with the Protestants on one side being Lutherans, and then we had the Catholics on the other side. And finally it comes to an end here, folks, in 1555 with a treaty which is called the Treaty of Augsburg, or the Peace of Augsburg. Now, Augsburg is a city in Germany which is located about in south-central Germany. And what they came up with, they decided upon, this was agreement between the Lutherans and agreements between the Catholics, which incidentally, this was the first recognition of Protestantism by the Catholic Church. Up until this time, they refused to recognize any form of the Protestant religion. Calvinists were excluded. Calvinists were not recognized by the Catholic Church. And I'll read this for you. You can't read my letter right here, but that is an E, but it's pronounced Cius Regio Ius Religio. Cius Regio Ius Religio. So if we put it all together and translate it into English, as the ruler, so the religion. So the Catholics and the Protestants have agreed upon this. What the nation is, if the nation has a Catholic king, then the religion in that nation will be Catholicism. If the kingdom, whatever it might be, has a Protestant ruler, then the religion will be Lutheranism, or a Protestant religion. All right, I'll say it again for you. This is a Peace of Augsburg. Cius Regio, Ius Religio, as the ruler, so the religion. All right, so the German religious wars come to a close. All right, now we're going to go into the next religious war, which is called the French Wars of Religion. That's just a loose term for it here. It's a long war. It lasts from 1562 to 1598 here. And on one side, we had the Catholics, and the predominant population in France, about 80% of the French population was that of Catholicism or Catholic. But we had about 20% of the population which were Calvinists. Now remember, Calvinists have not been recognized by the Catholic Church. Now, as I told you last semester, Calvinists in France are referred to as Huguenots. As Huguenots. If you can't read my writing, that's Huguenots. Huguenots. And the word is pronounced Huguenot. Huguenot. All right, so that was the situation that we had here, but we're going to see a growing population of Huguenots to take place in France during this period of time here, folks. From 1559 to 1562, the number of Huguenot churches went from 100 to 700 Huguenot churches in 3 short years of time. This is just a recipe for disaster. You know that we're going to have a war to take place between those two groups here. And both sides, the Huguenots and also the Catholics, both believe that there should be one roi foi loi. One roi foi loi. And if we translate that, that means one king, one faith, and one law. In other words, the Catholics were saying there would be a Catholic king, Catholicism would be the religion, and it would all fall under the Catholic Church. Where the Protestants, in the form of the Huguenots, French Calvinists, were saying it would be a French king, and it would be a Huguenot king, and we would all have the law to fall under the Protestant faith, there being that of the Huguenots. Okay, so anyway, war breaks out here. And for the Huguenots, greatly outnumbered here, the Huguenots were too strong to be defeated, but they were never strong enough to win. So it was a standoff. It went for many, many years between these Calvinists and also that of the Catholic faith. But then finally, it's going to come to a close. And this is a dramatic end here, folks. And I want to introduce you to somebody who is the French Queen Mother. And her name, and you want to pronounce her name like Catherine de Medici. Catherine de Medici. Of Italian descent here. It's a fine Italian name. I've given that to you before here. And it's a little bit confusing because her husband had been the king of France, but her husband had died, and the crown now goes to the king's son, who was actually too young to legitimately rule. So the son's mother is Catherine de Medici. So she is referred to as the Queen Mother. And she's a very nice individual here. She is Catholic here. And normally she's very tolerant of Protestants. Normally she's very tolerant of the Huguenots. Well, it just so happened that her daughter was scheduled to be married. Her daughter, I didn't write her name for you. Her daughter is Marguerite de Valois. Marguerite de Valois, and that's not important for you to remember that. And she was scheduled, if you want to call it that, she was betrothed to Henry of Navarre. Now, Henry of Navarre is an area in the northern parts of Spain. And Henry of Navarre, I guess we should call him Enrique of Navarre, is a Huguenot. So that is a weird combination when we have the king of Navarre, Henry of Navarre, who is a Huguenot, is going to marry the Catholic daughter of Catherine de Medici, which is present here. So that takes quite a bit of religious tolerance. So the wedding was supposed to take place, and it did take place. It was supposed to take place on the 18th of August in 1592. And the wedding took place here. But watch what's going to take place here, folks. Where the wedding took place was at Notre Dame Cathedral. Now, if you go to Notre Dame Cathedral today, it's a very beautiful church. This is what it looks like here. You're looking at it from the Seine River. This is from the Seine River. It's on the back side. The old town is on the front side where you see the Gothic columns that are present there. Some of you are probably well familiar with this. This church was caught fire about a year ago, maybe a little bit more than that anyway, and had a lot of destruction that took place there. It's the most beautiful church. A lot to talk to you about with this at a later time. So the wedding took place on the 18th of August in 1572 on the other side of the church. Actually, it was out in front of the church itself. All right, so try to track along with me before we go through this. So anyway, everyone knew that all the friends, all the high-ranking, so to speak, Huguenots would be there for the wedding. Now, weddings at that time were kind of unusual because when we had a wedding, then people that were supportive of the brides, people that were supportive of the groom, the friends of the Queen Mother, friends of Henry of Navarre, would all be present there in Paris. And weddings at that time would often last, like the festivities, would last like a week at a time. So it was an ideal opportunity where all these Huguenot leaders were present in Paris. They would be staying at boarding houses, staying at the places of friends. And so Catherine de Medici, she approved, and I cannot believe this, but she approved a plan that for the Catholics would murder all these Huguenot leaders and would murder them literally in their sleep with that. So they were all planning for the 24th of August in 1572 of 1572. This would be 6 days after the wedding had taken place here, and that's when the Catholics set upon these Huguenot leaders. Many of them, like I said, were in boarding houses or in hotels here, and set upon them in their sleep here. And some that tried to escape, some of the Huguenots that tried to escape and swim across the Seine River, literally the Catholics would just row after them or paddle after them in rowboats and just bludgeon them to death so that they would drown right there in the Seine River. Nobody knows to this day actually how many of those Huguenots lost their lives. It's estimated at a minimum at least 10,000 Huguenots were murdered here. Other estimates say as many as 100,000 Huguenots were killed in this St. Bartholomew's Day massacre, which is what it is referred to as. And let me go back and let me show you how we write that. And that is the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre. It took place on 24th of August, 1572. I don't hold you responsible for dates, but I darn well hope we'll hold you responsible for recognizing the event. It's the St. Bartholomew's Day massacre that took place there. All right, so anyway, that was quite an affair with that here. So as you probably can suspect, what's going to happen to the Huguenot resistance movement in Paris and also in France? It is going to steadily decline here. And ironically, the crazy thing about it here is that not very long after that, actually in 1589, is that Henry of Navarre, make sure you get this, and that Henry of Navarre now becomes the King of France. He is recognized as Henry IV. I guess we could call him Henri IV. A very good individual, quite a jovial person here. He was well liked, and sensibly he renounced his Huguenot faith and he became a devout Catholic here. All right, so anyway, that was Henry IV here. And what Henry IV did, by the way, he established the Edict of Nantes. The Edict of Nantes. Now, Nantes is a city which is in the southern parts of France. You see how it's spelled there, Nantes. What we pronounce it as Nantes. Now, an edict means like a ruling, an Edict of Nantes. It took place in 1598, and what it provided for was a limited amount of religious freedom for the Huguenots. In other words, in towns that did not have a bishop, then the Huguenots could worship in private homes or private castles, if you will, chateaus, but be in privacy with that. Edict of Nantes. So anyway, that was kind of a benefit for the Huguenots here under the benefit there of Henry IV. Let me share a photograph here showing you the very popular Henry IV. This photograph was taken in Paris. It's on one of the many bridges that span the Seine River there. Large statue, by the way. I wish I had a little bit better photograph of it, but that is all I can show you right there. A good article here. This came off of Wikipedia here. Just shows you a likeness there of Henri IV. By the way, after his death, and I'm going to tell you about his death in just a second, but after his death, his body was buried in a cemetery in Paris. During the French Revolution, his body was exhumed by, I don't know, I guess just revolutionaries that were present there, and they removed his head for whatever reason. I don't have any idea why they did that. And it's my understanding today that the head, the mummified head of Henry IV is in a private collection someplace. Why in the world would you ever want to have a mummified head of an individual? But I guess that turns some people on, so whatever the case is. All right, but unfortunately for Henry IV, and I think this took place, let's see if I have the date on it here, I believe it was the 14th of May, 14th of May in 1610, Henry IV was assassinated. He was actually stabbed by this individual here, Francois Ravaillac, who stabbed him. And what he was a fanatical Catholic, and what Ravaillac felt was that Henry was going to send a French army down to Rome and to assassinate or kill the Pope at that time here too, which was preposterous. It was not going to happen here. And for Francois Ravaillac, there's a likeness of him right here. He was tortured for 13 days and just tortured mercilessly, and then finally he was drawn and quartered. I don't think I need to explain that to you again, how drawing and quartering takes place here, folks. But if you were in my class right now, this article would be posted upon the easel there, and you could read about the torture here of Francois Ravaillac, and then the drawing and the quartering. Not a way that you wish to die. Okay, so anyway, that was that. All right, so the French religious wars now come to a close, and now we have another religious war, which is the Dutch Wars of Religion with Spain, going to take place from 1566 to 1609. And let me get you started with this here. Now, the Netherlands, and you know where the Netherlands is without me showing it on the map here. The Netherlands were under Habsburg rule. Now, the Habsburgs are Catholic here. They were under Charles V. Charles V, the Holy Roman Emperor I was telling you about a little bit earlier. All right, so we'll catch up here with our notes here. We have the Habsburgs and Catholics, Charles V, but Charles V retired. And he didn't die at that time, but he retired in 1556. Now, Charles V had two sons. He had one son, which was Ferdinand. I don't want to talk about Ferdinand. And he had another son who was Philip. All right, we call him technically Philip II. He lives in Spain, so actually his name is Felipe II. Felipe II. Felipe II here. And the part of the empire of Charles V that was given to Philip II included the Netherlands. That's where Holland is located, the Netherlands, but it also included Spain, and it likewise included all the Spanish-controlled areas in the New World. Now, what was not included and went to Ferdinand II was Habsburg Austria and that part of Europe that's in Central Europe and also in the eastern parts of Europe here. Well, as it turned out, with the wars that were taking place in France, and I'm talking about the French religious wars, many of the French people actually went north into Catholic Netherlands just to get away from the fighting that was present there. So nonetheless, what we're going to find is a number of churches, Huguenot churches, which actually is Dutch Reform, that the number of churches that are present in Spain at that time literally tripled in number here. So we had a lot of Huguenots, Dutch Reform would be a better name for it, which were Calvinists that were present in the Netherlands. And what started this was when these Calvinists began to desecrate and destroy Catholic churches there. Now remember, the Netherlands are under the control of Philip II. So Philip II made the statement here, I am not and will not be the ruler of heretics. So what are you going to do? This means that you're going to take a large army of about 12,000, place them under the command of an individual known as the Duke of Alva, or Alba, if you want to pronounce it that way. It kind of sums it up here, folks, when we look at his nickname, the Butcher of Flanders, and sent this 12,000-man army up into the Netherlands to take care of this Calvinist problem with the Dutch Reformed individuals that were there. And they spared no means in taking care of their responsibilities. And he ended up arresting and trying and executing just literally thousands of these Huguenots. I'm looking around for something here, and I'll find it here. This is called the Massacre of the Innocents. It's a very famous painting here by Peter Bruegels of that period of time, by the way, and which shows you the slaughter, if you will, here of the innocents of the Calvinists that are present there in the Netherlands at that time. So anyway, it was a brutal, brutal affair. Okay, now the Calvinists did not take this lying down. And for many of the Dutch, they were led by this individual. You'll get comfortable with this as we continue through the course here, folks. A person by the name of William the Silent, also known as William of Nassau, later to be known as William the First. Don't get him confused with William the Conqueror, William the First, that went to England. He was a Norman that went to England. Different individual here. But William the Silent, also called William of Nassau or William the First. And he will lead this resistance of the Dutch against the Spanish. But the Dutch Calvinists were too small in number. So what William I did, William the Silent, he ended up going to Germany, France, and England to garner assistance, and I'm talking about military assistance here, to fight against the Dutch. And sure enough, the war will come to an end with that. All right, the war will come to an end. Unfortunately for William the Silent, he was assassinated here, I think it was in 1584, I believe it was, and his son, William II, will become the new leader of the Dutch. So that war comes to an end. All right, so let's move on here, and I want to go back to England. England was not spared, some of the religious problems, but we're really not ready to go into that right now. We'll catch that at a different time. But I want to tell you about England and particularly Latin England. Did I write her name down? I did here. Queen Elizabeth I, one of my favorite individuals. The Virgin Queen, Gloriana, Good Queen Bess, she's sometimes referred to as. Her reign was 1558 to 1603. She never married, the Virgin Queen. I think this portrait here is likewise in your textbook, if you're following in your textbook, showing you one of the many, many portraits here of Good Queen Bess, Elizabeth I. And she was an Anglican, by the way. I would have to go back to last semester and refresh your memory on that, and we really don't have time to do that, but everybody remember King Henry VIII. King Henry VIII that declared himself as the head of the Church of England. When he died, he would be followed by his son, Edward VI, and followed by his other daughter, Mary, and Mary, which restored Catholicism to England. And when she died in 1558, Elizabeth restored the Church of England as the official English church here. Okay, now, I want you to imagine this. Now, England does not have the wealth. It doesn't have the wealth of many of the other European countries here, but we had a couple of individuals which were recognized as English privateers. They're actually pirates here. We look at the individuals here. A couple of these individuals, Sir Francis Drake and Sir John Hawkins here, and they were privateers, and these were guys that were pirates, and they would man these English ships. And just think about it for a second. Where is Spain getting its treasures from? Where is it getting its silver from? And where they're getting their silver from is from South America, Latin America, or maybe in the areas of Mexico. That's where they're getting their treasures from. So that means that these treasures have to be sent back on Spanish ships. But what if you had individuals here, such as Sir Francis Drake and Sir John Hawkins, with their English privateering ships, which are no more than pirates? What if they were preying upon these Spanish ships? And by stopping the Spanish ships, they will ease the Spanish ship of the burden of their silver, and then they will take it back with them and bring it back to England. And they kept doing this and stopping the Spanish ships, and then the Spanish ships became aware of this. The Spanish sea captains became aware of this. So actually what Sir Francis Drake had to do, he had to lead his expedition around the southern tips of South America and then cross the Pacific Ocean, go through the Philippines area there, the Indian Ocean, and around the Cape of Good Hope and make their way back to England in that fashion. And I might suggest to you at this point, how do you think Queen Elizabeth felt about this when all the Spanish silver was brought back to her? And I imagine she was overjoyed with that. And my next question to you would be, how do you think that the King of Spain feels about this, Philip II? And I think you would agree with me, he is very, very upset. And so what Philip II did, he organized this huge, huge armada, Philip II of Spain, and it was referred to as the Invincible Armada. And this armada was to punish England. And what he did, he assembled his force here, and it would be constituted of 20,000 Spanish soldiers, 2,000 artillery pieces, 131 ships, and to attack England. And if he did so, then you could restore Catholicism by defeating England and regain the wealth that you had lost before. So let me show you what I'm talking about here, and I'm going to use my map that is behind me here, folks. All right, so what's going to happen here is this huge armada, Spanish armada. Oops, you can't see that. Let me get it up like that. It's going to leave out of this area here of Spain and sail up in this area here. Use my map here so that you can appreciate this. All right, and then it's going to make its way, the armada is going to make its way up here. But the English were aware of this, and so what the English did, they took about half the Royal Navy, and they hid the Royal Navy up here in the coves and in the harbors up in this area, and they took the remainder of the Royal Navy and put it up into this area. So track along with me here. And so what happens here, as the Spanish come in, the Spanish enter into the English Channel, and when they do so, in their large galleons, when they do so, the English come in behind them here, and when the English that are here. So if you haven't gotten completely lost, then English now have this huge armada literally trapped in place there. Now the English ships were much smaller. The Spanish galleons were much larger. So when the Spanish would often fire their cannons, the cannons would literally go, they couldn't deflect the barrels low enough, so the cannon shots would literally go over the tops of the English ships, or through the sails of the English ships. And then the English began to use what were called fire ships, in which they would take ships that were kind of unworthy of sailing anyway, set them of fire and literally, just like with tugboats, pushed them into the Spanish ships and caused those Spanish ships to catch fire with that. And they ended up destroying about half the Spanish armada there. Now, for the remainder of the armada, there's no going back. There's no going back in this direction. So the only thing you can do is to continue up through the channel here, up into the North Sea, up in this fashion, where they were caught in Protestant gales, as they were sometimes referred to as, Protestant storms that destroyed almost the remainder of the Spanish armada. And for the remainder of the ships, they made their way down here, like well, it actually went down like this, and then limped back into Spain itself. Now, what that's referred to as, that is the defeat of the Spanish Armada. Defeat of the Spanish Armada. Now, I'm going to go back to me. I shouldn't have turned that down. Now, many people have argued that was a turning point in history. By all rights, the Spanish Armada should have been successful. England should have been defeated. And if England was defeated, we would have had Catholicism restored to England itself. Spain would have regained its wealth. But as it turns out, the Spanish Armada was indeed defeated here. A turning point in history here, folks. All right, so that's the way we do business here, folks. I've been talking to you about 40 minutes on an introductory lecture here. So let me call it quits for now, and when we come back, we are going to continue this with the 30 Years' War. Going to get a little bit into philosophy. We'll talk about William Shakespeare a little bit, and before the end of the next class period, we'll be into absolutism. Kind of fun period of time here. Okay, thank you for your attendance.